And we're going to start this chat with Gayton McKenzie, Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, and the only person who tweets more than Elon Musk. That guy, if oversharing was a person. Gayton McKenzie came in really hot when he was minister. The very weekend he became minister, he announced that he would try to make spinning a sport, which confused millions of South Africans who thought he meant the stationary bike in the gym. Santon housewives were getting excited about going professional. Now, he didn't mean that. He meant spinning cars. Sorry, Santon housewives. Keep going at paddle, though. Your dreams are valid, baby. It can come true for you. Gayton spent the next few weeks making himself the most accessible, accountable, transparent man of the people minister on Twitter. He dragged his own department. He made his own department reveal which artists got COVID relief funding and how much they got. He cancelled superfans funding from the department for the likes of Mama Joy and generally made clear that he would end fruitless and wasteful expenditure and corruption in every part of government he could touch. He weighed in on Miss South Africa and swimming pools and the Springboks. He responded to all kinds of people. He just couldn't stop tweeting, guys. That man has the itchiest fingers since Django in Django Unchained. He could not help himself. And all this social media posting has really worked out for him. It's dramatically increased his profile. He's now far more famous than 6 months ago. He's far bigger than his political party is. He's a household name. And now, Gayton is under fire for taking a trip to the Olympics. He tweeted that he didn't go. He said he only went to the opening ceremony, but then he told Parliament that actually he did go. And now, to try and uphold his new reputation as the transparency guy, he has told us what everything on his trip cost. Gayton McKenzie's week-long gallivant at the Olympics cost the department, which means taxpayers' money, over 800,000 rand. And the details don't make sense, people. The Department of Sports, Arts and Culture spent 215,000 rand on flights. Apparently business class. The average flight to Paris around that time was between 18,000 and 30,000 rand. Gayton didn't really explain why his flights cost so much money. And then accommodation in his nice Lekker hotel near the Olympic Village cost 113,000 rand. But then it gets very, very weird, because there was a line item that said that ground transport for a week is listed as costing 454,005 rand. Nearly 500,000 rand for Uber for a week. What was he driving around in? A Ferrari? He specifically said his hotel was near the Olympic Village. Why doesn't he walk? Wasn't he training for a marathon? How did it cost this much? McKenzie hasn't explained this cost either. Now, we know that many South Africans haven't been to Europe, and so maybe we aren't sure how to feel about these costs, because maybe the Rand-Euro exchange rate means that all this spending may not actually be that crazy when you're in France. So we, the Dan Corder Show, went on a luxury car rental site in Paris to see what 454,005 rand could get us for 1 week that Gayton was in Paris. This is the Ferrari SF90 Stradale. It's so expensive that you've probably never heard of it before. I hadn't. A Ferrari SF90 Stradale goes for €2,500 a day rental in Paris. So if Gayton were to rent it for a week, it would have cost him €17,500, which works out to 334,783 rand and 75 cents. So if Gayton had rented this top-of-the-line Ferrari for his week in Paris, he would have got the car and also 119,000 rands change from his ground transport money of 454K. And he could have used that 119,000 rand to also rent this Maserati Grand Cabrio. Those two cars between them can handle up to 6 people in Gayton's delegation, and even if he took more than 6 people, now you can see how frankly insane it is to spend 454,000 rand on ground transport in Paris for a week. Gayton says he also had a chauffeur service, but again, why was it this expensive? Was his chauffeur Charles Leclerc? Because if it wasn't, it makes absolutely no sense. Now, Minister McKenzie has since thrown his department under the bus again, saying that he would get to the bottom of how all this money was spent. He basically pulled a Shaggy, right, and said, nice. That's why we pay them the big bucks. But for me, Gayton saying he didn't know about this, it was the department's fault, is kind of worse, isn't it? For a minister to imply that he's not on top of what his own department is doing on his own travel. It's giving asleep at the wheel, or at least distracted. But by now, I'm sure you're wondering, Dan, didn't you start this segment by saying we're getting into a new kind of politics? When is that going to start? So that's what I'm going to tell you about right now, and it relates to Gayton McKenzie. Last week, Action SA spokesperson Michael Beaumont criticized what he is calling our GNU Instagram government. He said, and I quote, "It looks like an Instagram government has emerged in South Africa, a government that tends to make announcements and tweets more than it does in terms of policy and legislative reform. We have people saying they are going to fight corruption, but when they get into cabinet, they sit next to those who are implicated in corruption. We are seeing short-term gains and claiming credit for things that do not belong there. Just because something happens while you are here doesn't mean it happened because of you." Now, Beaumont is totally right about this. There is a new wave in South African politics of generally younger politicians that have started to do serious brand building through social media, like Gayton McKenzie has. Fikile Mbalula and Julius Malema have massively raised their profiles through Twitter. Cape Town's Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis is maybe the blueprint of how to perform his job online in a way that makes him look impressive and appear as an effective mayor. So we are seeing the performance art of politics evolving in South Africa, right? And it makes sense. Politicians gain power through popularity, and they gain popularity through brand building, through narrative construction about themselves for the public to see. And we've seen plenty of this overseas. Kamala Harris's tweets, Joe Biden's tweets. We know he's not tweeting them, but Joe Biden's tweets. That man can't unlock his BlackBerry. Donald Trump's social media app Truth Social is another example. And now South African politicians are catching up. And this is a big change in our country. It used to be that to rise up in South African politics, you needed to rise up within a political party, right? It didn't matter what the public thought of you, or even if they knew who you were, because power was gained internally. If you got in the ANC's good books or became Helen Zille's new favorite plaything, you would rise, you know that's what they're like. You would rise rapidly within the parties, and then you would get real power. Now, though, because of self-generated content online, politicians can seize popularity themselves, independent of the party. That's what Chris Pappas did so well, you remember, and he ended up being the DA's pick for premier of KZN. And that's what Gayton McKenzie has done, because he is punching far, far, far above his own party's weight. Michael Beaumont doesn't like this evolution in South African politics, and I can understand why. Our politicians are getting much better at doing themselves some great PR through social media, and that can skew the public's view from what is actually going on behind the scenes. But hear me out on this. I think that this evolution is actually a fantastic development for our politics, our country, and our democracy. And this Gayton McKenzie Olympics drama shows exactly why I think that. The more visible a politician becomes, the more real they become to us. They become celebrities of a kind with stories that we are invested in. The more we know about them, the more we notice when they have controversies, right? And the more we can hold them accountable. Gayton McKenzie has made himself high visibility. He's made sure that we all know that he is the transparency, accountability, and good governance guy. So when he slips up, we all know about it. And that has consequences for his reputation, which will have consequences for him during elections when he wants people to vote for him. And that is good. That's what motivates politicians to act right. When politicians are low-vis, when we don't know much about them and what they're selling and doing, they don't suffer the same consequences. Just quick split test, who here knows about the ANC's Pule Mabe? Even a little bit. The ANC's Pule Mabe is facing serious charges of corruption totaling tens of millions of rands. But I bet you may not know about that because he's low-vis. Zizi Kodwa, on the other hand, we all know about him. He's facing charges totaling far, far less money. But we all know about it because he made himself known to us. And that's exactly why I love this new wave of high-vis politics. Politicians making themselves known to us through self-generated content media. Firstly, politicians becoming famous, it's just good for our country because it means we have all got more knowledge, more opinions about them, which means a stronger, healthier, more informed democracy. Secondly, it means that when they screw up, when they don't keep their promises, when they aren't who they say they are, we all see and know that it's happening. And we can call them out in our families, friendship circles, and on social media. So these high-vis politicians are motivated to do their jobs and keep their word, because if they do, they'll be rewarded by voters. And if they don't, they will suffer loss of popularity, meaning loss of votes, meaning loss of power. And I think that is really, really good, and it's what our country needs.